and they'll make you that. And the Q course is already the longest school for special operations. You can make a Ranger in a couple months. You can make a SEAL in 6 to 9 months. To be a Green Beret, it's gonna take over a year.
So when did the idea of becoming a Green Beret start to kind of check into your mind?
I don't know exactly when it hit. To be honest with you, I started reading books. I started reading even in AIT. Started reading every book I can get a hold of, and of course, if there's a book being written, it's more than likely a special operations book. If it's current. So even in 02, 03, there are already books being written about special operations and war. So probably from reading books and just reading these wild stories, and be like, man, that's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's lined up more with the vision of what I thought I would be doing or that I wanted to do when I joined. So that really was, I think, my inspiration. Books, reading other people's stories, and I'm so glad I did. Again, not to jump ahead, but this is about books. There's absolutely no substitute for the experience, for getting in there and doing it and having that physical experience of going on target. But even though I hadn't been on target yet, I had read so many books about missions. There was a lot of things when I got there, I was like, yeah, this is kind of what I thought it was, because you're reading books of guys telling real stories that they were there, and it put me in mindsets of guys getting in trouble on target or having a bad day on target and having to make all these decisions. So when I eventually was on target and moved forward, now it had its own variables of this is now my specific problem. But generally speaking, I've at least mentally put myself in a lot of these situations, and I've read these stories, and history does repeat itself. So reading books absolutely prepared me for what I was going to see. So I got the idea from reading books, and I'm so glad I did. Just did a commencement speech at Georgetown ROTC. I gave them 3 things that I challenged them to do between now and they get to their first duty station. And number 2, read as many military history books as you possibly can, and don't stop after you get there.
So do you think at that point you had a really good understanding of what special operations was, especially after going through it later?
Yeah, I really do. The information's out there. So it always blows my mind when there's people that show up unprepared or without like really understanding what they signed up to do. I have no compassion for them. The information's out there. I knew exactly what I was getting into.
Mm-hmm. So the next steps, looking to become a Green Beret. I guess one quick tangent on that, was there considerations of looking at some of the different groups? So whether it be like Rangers, possibly SEALs. I mean, I know you're with Army at that point technically. I mean, what was the options there?
The options was Green Beret.
Mm-hmm.
That was really all my only options, because I was already in the Florida National Guard.
Yeah.
And there is a National Guard Special Forces group, 20th. Well, there's 2, 19th group and 20th group. The problem is, I just said I have no compassion if you don't know what you're getting into. There's, of course, there's limits to that. I knew exactly what I was getting into training wise, and what I was, and what a team was made up of, and what they did overseas, at least based off those books, and it was pretty accurate. But being in the National Guard, those guys really had no frame of reference to give me advice to go over there, because none of them, generally, and this isn't a hit on Air Defense National Guard, but I don't think it's anyone's surprise they're not exactly a feeder unit to special operations. Mm-hmm. So none of those guys came from there or have friends there. So it was an information black hole. And rather than just telling me they don't know, several of them were more than happy to tell me what they heard, which were wildly inaccurate. So when I was like, hey, there's a National Guard Special Forces group, I want to go there. They're like, Brent, you can't go there. You have to be an E6 to go there. And there's not true. You can't go there. The only people that go there were already active duty Green Berets, and you have to be an active duty Green Beret. And if you come off active duty, you can go to National Guard. It's not true. And it just goes on and on. So trying to get some actual information on how to go from National Guard Air Defense to National Guard Special Forces without knowing anyone over there. And it was that was very tough. That was difficult. And when I finally got a phone number, I ended up getting a phone number for him. When I finally got a phone number for him, it was actually right before we deployed. So I said we mobilized and went to Texas, and then we watched the invasion go on. So basically, as soon as I got out of AIT, I wanted to go to Special Forces, and that's when I started feeling around and got a phone number for him. And I called him, cold called him, just Private Tucker. And
how you doing?
Yeah, hey, this is Private Tucker.
Yeah.
You may have heard of me. To my surprise, they had not, and they really wanted nothing to do with me. And I remember, because I actually ended up going to that unit. I remember this day, the guy who picked up the phone, a guy named Kurt Carey, who was their recruiter. They were getting ready to go to war, and our unit was technically getting ready to go to war, and I was a private. So I had a lot of things going against me. And he was like, hey, just call back when you're go to war with the unit, call back when you're a specialist. So when we went to Texas, mobilized, saw the invasion happen without us, and then we demobilized. I did get promoted to specialist while I was there. So the first thing I did when I got back was call Sergeant First Class Carey right back and said, hey, we're back, and now I'm a specialist. And he reluctantly, he still didn't seem that impressed. And to be honest, which I loved, like that man was like, oh yeah, you don't believe me? Yeah, you don't believe me? You don't think I'll come over here and crush it? You know, I score a 300 on the P. That's all I had. But I knew if they gave me a chance, whatever they gave me a chance to do, that I would go over there and crush it. And so they finally allowed me to come over, and they were going to do an interview with me. They said, hey, we're going to do a PT test. You're going to do a ruck. You're going to do a couple events. And it's like a 1 day, just kind of try out to see if you're even worth energy and effort to send a selection. And although I said I knew what I was getting into as a team guy, again, there's certain things I just that you don't know. And well, with this, I don't know if I do any different. I showed up to that unit, Specialist Tucker, in a starched uniform and highly polished boots. And as soon as I walked in, he looked at me like I was an idiot. He was like, tell me you have a different uniform to wear, and those aren't the boots you're going to ruck in. And I'm like, yes.
I'll be right back.
But in hindsight, that actually is the right answer. You don't show up in a baseball hat and a bad uniform like you've already earned it, because you've earned nothing. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not socially aware, to have someone tell you to get into a bad uniform rather than show up like a dirtbag and be like, you've earned nothing, get into a good uniform, that's still the right call. So I went there. I crushed at least the physical portion of it. And that's when they transferred me over to take me on to send me selection. Now, a parting gift my air defense unit gave me was they tried to fight me. They didn't want me. They didn't want me to go. And the reason they didn't want me to go, because even though they had demobilized, they had this dream still that technically, and I don't remember the specifics of it, but for like the next 6 to 12 months, as long as they keep all their personnel, we're still a certified unit. So we'd met all the tasks, and at any point we could just get called up and go. And so they were kind of holding on to that hope. And so they didn't want to let me go. And they fought it, and then that you can't stop a guy from progressing his career in Special Forces as a career progression, progression.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a career progression, and they let me have it when I left. Like, you're gonna come back. Like, no one goes to Special Forces from here. This was a big waste of time. You left kicking and screaming. We'll see you in a few months. And it's the best thing they could have done for me.
I was gonna say it was another motivating
factor.
factor.
Absolutely. By the time I got to selection, it didn't matter how bad things got. Although I was raised right, and I'm absolutely humble on the outside. Some people will laugh at that me as a young Green Beret, but at this time, I went 100%. I'm a very humble person, but I'm also very prideful on the inside, and there's no way my pride was going to let me quit and go back to them and be like, "You were right. I quit." So I was going to make it. I already knew I was physically good enough. So at the end of the day, just was I mentally tough enough? And I knew I was going to quit. Thanks to those naysayers.
I was going to say, it seems like you've had a number of factors that you've kind of utilized as, an opportunity to use it as juice to be able to get forward.
There's so many victims out there in the world. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I was small as a kid. I had to work twice as hard as anyone else to be just as good at them at baseball or football or basketball. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It put in a work ethic and a drive at a young age. Or I could have just been a victim and be like, I'm just a little kid. I'll never be good at sports. I came from a small town. I came from, I was just in a National Guard unit. There's so many things that I could have looked at and say, well, this is why this won't work out. When everything, a good friend in business actually told me he never likes to use the word, I have a problem. And so whenever I talk to him, if I ever say, have a problem, he goes, no, you don't. You have an opportunity. And if more people would look at their problems as opportunities, I don't know. I think we'd lose a lot of our victims in this country.
Have a lot more solutions.
Absolutely. So yeah, I just, for whatever reason, I chose to use all that as fuel, and it served me well.
I love that quote, man. I might have to hang that up in the studio. I like that.
Jordan story.
So I guess getting on to the next steps. So you're able to integrate in Special Forces, starting to look to become a Green Beret. Next step's Q course, correct?
Yeah. There's not a lot of books written about the Q course, at this time. And, they may have talked about selection a little bit. So I knew what selection was about. I knew it was about land navigation and wrecking. That's generally what selection is about. The Q course itself, there isn't a lot about it, and maybe because the Q course, I'll say this in two different ways, as almost they're opposing views, but they're not. When I got done with the Q course, although it was hard, it was absolutely hard, and we lost a lot of guys. It wasn't that challenging. It didn't give me the advanced skills I thought I would have. It was challenging, but I left it with basic skills. But what I didn't understand was I left it mastering the basic skills. So what you want is, as soon as you don that Green Beret, you want to think, oh, I'm now a sniper. I'm now a CQB expert. I'm now an explosive expert. I'm now all these things. You're not. The day you don that Green Beret, you are the master of the basics, and it's by design. You have a firm foundation. They're going to bolt on all those accessories to you throughout your career. And I did just that. I ended up going, I went to SFAUC, Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat School. I went to sniper school. I went to breaching schools. I went to dive school. I went to all these advanced schools, but without a solid foundation that the Q course gives you, you'd have never done the advanced stuff correctly. So it was challenging, but it was disappointing to some degree. But those were expectations that I had unrealistically put on the Q course. And the more I went to war with the Green Berets, the more I look back at the Q course and go like, man, the Q course was exactly the Q course is right. It's exactly what we needed. Robin Sage, which is the culmination exercise of unconventional warfare. They put you in scenarios there like, that doesn't seem realistic. I'll give you an example. You show up to your you call it a G base, your guerrilla base, and in this script, you have to make them trust you. They're always trying to leave you, and you're always trying to keep them and explain to them why they should stay. And as a as a student, I'm like, this is stupid. Like, we're Americans. We have tons of money. We have bombers in the sky that we can provide them. We have weapons we can provide them. I don't have to come in and talk anyone into being my partner. So fast forward about 6 years, we're in Afghanistan running the commando mission, one of the best deployments of my life. And the commandos, their charter says they're a 3-day, a 72-hour strike force. And they know that. These Afghans know that they basically expire in 72 hours. So we're doing this valley clearing operation, and it's going to last over 72 hours. And now these guys, our task was to make sure that we were doing what's called building capacity. So instead of us just leading you around the battlefield all the time, we were trying to get them to plan the missions, them to do their own infill, them to do their own exfil. And they were never good at it. Except now that their 72 hours is done, they come up to us like, hey, see that line of taxis over there? Like, yeah, we see them. Like, that, they're for us. We're leaving. Like, what do you mean you're leaving? We're in 3 days worth of firefights. These guys haven't been able to plan anything on their own to this point. But now that they want to go home, they can line up a whole convoy, essentially a contracted convoy on their own in the middle of nowhere. That's impressive. So you can do it. And I remember thinking, this is just like Robin Sage. Like, here I am begging my G's, my guerrilla force, to stay and not leave me. And again, just the longer I did the job, the more I looked back and said, man, the Q course is exactly what it needs to be.
So that's interesting, because that's kind of what I was getting to earlier, where it's like, and even what we talked about at the top, when people think special forces, I think they highlight exactly what you're saying is like, you're going to become an expert in all this. You're a Spartan from a video game type of deal. And it's like,
right.
You're like, realistically, you're highlighting here, the basics
right.
are what gets you through. What
you have is the ability to be molded to be that Spartan. You have all the tools necessary, and they will make you, give them a few more years, and they'll make you that. And the Q course is already the longest school for special operations. You can make a Ranger in a couple months. You can make a SEAL in 6 to 9 months. To be a Green Beret, it's gonna take over a year. And it's a long course. So by the time you get done with it, you're kind of out of patience. You're like, I don't want to take another few years to get what I came here for. But like anything else, time moves fast. You'll be there before you know it. Trust the process.
So I always like to ask this: what type of person do you think is needed for a Green Beret?
Problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
Problem solver. That's a true problem solver. Fits everything. And when I say that, I've had people go, well, does he need to be fit? Yeah, like a fit problem solver? No, because if he's unfit, that's a problem. And he will solve the problem of fitness. And he doesn't need to go read Men's Health, magazines, or maybe he will. Like whatever it takes, he's a problem solver. So he will be fit if he's a true problem solver. Being that one key aspect, and a reason why I think that's a little bit more Green Beret specific. Let's take the Rangers, for example. The Rangers are a strike force, and they get told in the traditional sense. So let's say they're doing a legacy mission of airfield seizures. They have a known target. They have a known, for the most part, enemy disposition. Everything is very known. This squad is going here to do this. This other platoon is going here to do this. They're just there to execute. And there's not a lot of problem solving involved. It's more execution oriented. And that's the same way with almost any strike force. The Navy SEALs, again, a very, strategic strike force. The Green Berets are they are a guerrilla or unconventional warfare unit. And an unconventional warfare unit, you drop behind enemy lines and you say, we don't really know what's going on back here. It's behind enemy lines. These are your men. You tell us what you need. And that is what makes Green Berets very different from a lot of different special operations. Instead of being driven from the top down, everything's driven from the bottom up. And so if you're going to drive information and answers from the bottom up, you better be a problem solver. And if you're not a very good problem solver, then you will not get the end result of what you were sent there to do.